A gray autumn morning wrapped around the suburbs of Blackburn. Beneath the soft sound of rain trickling down the windows, Jack West strolled along the path by the neatly trimmed flower beds in front of their cozy two-story house. His tall figure and calm smile drew attention. A doctor, the soul of the town, he always seemed like the embodiment of care and reliability. People considered him almost the perfect father and husband. Jack's wife, Laura, stood by the window, watching her husband wave to a neighbor. Unlike Jack, Laura often seemed a bit distant. She was a psychologist and spent most of her time at home, handling family matters and consulting her clients online. She appeared to be a caring wife and mother, deeply invested in the cozy atmosphere of their home. Everything in their life seemed out of a textbook. They loved each other, raised their little daughter, and were friends with their neighbors. The center of attention was always Anna, a 5-year-old girl, fair-haired and cheerful, with a charming smile capable of melting any heart. She was adored, not only by her parents but by the entire neighborhood. Neighbors often heard her infectious laughter as she played in the yard or rode her bike along the street. Jack and Laura always supported her interests, taking her to dance classes and even organizing a small soccer team for her friends. The West family often hosted gatherings for the neighbors. Their house was always filled with warmth and comfort, especially in autumn when Laura baked her signature pumpkin pie and shared it with everyone over a cup of hot tea. The evenings were full of laughter and conversations, and the neighbors considered the Wests the model of a perfect family. On social media, Laura often posted pictures of Anna, at her classes, on walks, or playing at home. Followers admired the tender bond between mother and daughter, sincerely believing in this perfect image. Laura did everything she could to seem like an impeccable mother, investing time and effort in carefully choosing captions that reflected their true feelings. But if anyone looked a little closer, they would notice that the perfection of this family was all too superficial. Laura and Jack, constantly absorbed in the role of ideal parents, seemed to have forgotten how to be themselves. Jack sometimes looked at Laura as if she were a stranger. Laura, in return, appeared cold and distant, as if hiding behind a flawless facade. That morning, as she watched her husband leave, Laura stood by the window, thoughtfully fingering the edge of the curtain. The indoor light illuminated her face, but in her eyes was a strange weariness that neither neighbors nor her social media followers could see. Only Anna, who had run into the kitchen for her favorite teddy bear, noticed that her mother looked somehow different. But the little girl quickly became distracted by her toy and ran out of the room, not giving her mother's expression a second thought. Jack left, and Laura was alone in the house. The entire picture of their perfect life existed only in the eyes of outsiders. A week had passed since Jack and Laura West had decided to display their perfect life to the world, but something had changed. Anna was the first to sense it, small and perceptive as children often are. Normally full of energy and curiosity, she suddenly became withdrawn, as if something weighed on her little heart. One evening, when the sun had already disappeared behind the horizon and darkness covered the streets, Jack returned home late. His steps were a bit faster than usual, as if he wanted to escape from something. Laura, as always, greeted him with a warm smile, but her gaze was tense, as though her mind was elsewhere. "Is everything all right?" Laura asked, pretending not to notice anything unusual. Jack hesitated for a moment before responding. His face remained calm, but there was a trace of worry in his eyes. "Of course, everything's fine," he replied, trying to sound nonchalant. But there was an unmistakable tension in his tone. Anna, sitting in her room with her teddy bear, heard her parents' low but tense voices. She moved closer to the door and pressed her ear to it, trying to understand what they were talking about. Her parents had always seemed so strong and sure, but now, sensing their hidden tension, she felt afraid for the first time. Meanwhile, the conversation between Jack and Laura grew quieter. Laura seemed to try to stop Jack from being fully honest, but she couldn't. He could no longer hide something that had been buried deep inside. "Laura, I just can't stand it anymore. This fake facade. It's not our life anymore, Jack finally said quietly, without taking his eyes off her. Shoo, Anna might hear, Laura interrupted quickly, glancing toward the door. For a moment, silence fell. They knew that behind their exemplary life hid something dark, something they were desperately trying to forget. But the truth always finds a way to come out, especially when one is so desperate to hide it. After that conversation, Anna couldn't sleep. The little girl felt that her perfect family wasn't as perfect as she thought. And although she couldn't understand everything she'd heard, a strange, unpleasant fear started growing inside her. A few days later, Laura noticed that Anna was starting to complain about stomach pains. At first, it seemed like something minor, maybe a passing discomfort or a reaction to the changing weather. But every day, Anna seemed to feel worse. Laura watched her daughter with worry, unable to understand where the pains were coming from. Jack, being a doctor, tried to stay calm, reassuring Laura that everything would be all right. However, the pain kept getting worse, and Anna began to cry frequently, complaining about her discomfort. She looked tired and downcast, and her once bright eyes had dulled. Jack and Laura began taking her to different doctors, but none could provide a clear diagnosis. The neighbors started to notice changes in the West family's behavior. Previously always smiling and friendly, they now avoided interaction. Laura appeared less and less on social media, and when she did post something, the photos of Anna looked strange, as if she were being forced to smile. With each passing day, Anna felt worse, and Laura tried to take care of her as if she were compensating for a strange feeling that weighed on her own heart. Several weeks had passed since Anna started complaining of stomach pains and loss of appetite, but the girl's condition continued to worsen. Laura and Jack, despite all their efforts, couldn't find any answers. They had run multiple tests and visited several doctors, but no diagnosis had been made. Each visit to the specialists only added more questions. Anna was becoming more and more withdrawn. She refused to eat, grew tired quickly, and could no longer play like she used to. Laura felt her heart breaking as she looked at her daughter, but she couldn't understand what was happening. Jack tried to stay calm because he knew how important it was to maintain stability during such times. But the longer they searched for answers, the more obvious it became that something was being hidden from them, and it wasn't just an illness. One night, when Anna finally fell asleep, Laura sat in the kitchen, reflecting on the recent events. She silently sipped her cup of tea, recalling the oddities in Jack's behavior, how he had become more distant, how an invisible wall seemed to have risen between them. She didn't understand what was going on, but instinctively, she felt that he was hiding something important. When Jack came home late that night, Laura noticed how exhausted he looked, but his face showed an unshakable determination. He passed by her without saying a word and headed to his office. Laura sat on the couch, listening to his footsteps. A few minutes later, Jack returned to the kitchen. "You know something's not right, don't you?" Laura asked him, not waiting for him to start the conversation. Jack slowed his pace but didn't respond immediately. He stopped by the window, crossing his arms over his chest, and looked out into the darkness. "I don't know what to think, Laura," he finally replied, his voice low but tense. "Everything that's happening with Anna, it's strange. And I don't like that I'm starting to doubt what's really going on." Laura felt a chill in her chest. She stepped closer to him, not understanding what he was trying to say. "Are you accusing me of something?" she asked with a touch of irritation, unable to hide her growing concern. "No, I'm not accusing you," Jack responded, abruptly turning toward her. "But something's not right. I've started noticing strange things, Laura. I think you're hiding something." Jack's words shocked her like an electric jolt. Laura stepped back, not believing what she had just heard. She felt her heart race, and the air seemed thick. "Hiding?" Laura tried to keep her voice steady, but it trembled with anxiety. "What are you talking about?" Jack paused, and there was a mixture of doubt and concern in his eyes. "I can't keep quiet anymore. You keep saying everything will be fine, that we'll find a solution, but I see that you don't want to face the truth. You post pictures of Anna on social media where she's smiling, as if everything is fine, but I see how she really looks. You make her smile even though I know she's in pain. Laura felt her legs give way. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Do you think I'm doing something wrong? Her voice was barely audible, but it carried a sense of confusion. I just want her to be happy. I know, Jack said, stepping closer to her. But you can't keep ignoring what's going on. You post those photos as if everything's fine and show the world we have a perfect family, but in reality, you don't want to admit that our daughter is suffering. We're all suffering, Laura. But you keep creating another reality. Laura clenched her fists. Jack's words were like a cold blow to her conscience. She couldn't deny that in the past few weeks, she had been more focused on maintaining a perfect image to the outside world than on the real condition of Anna. The constant pursuit of being the perfect mother, of creating an ideal family, had distracted her from the truth. I don't know what to do, Jack, her voice cracked, and tears began to fill her eyes. I'm scared. I don't want our life to fall apart. I'm afraid that if we admit that something's wrong with Anna, we'll lose everything. Jack moved closer to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. Laura, we can't keep going like this. We can't hide the truth. Anna is sick, and we need to understand what's happening to her. We can't keep building this facade, hoping everything will somehow resolve itself. It won't. Laura, with her face in her hands, felt all her strength crumble. She knew Jack was right, but deep down, she wasn't ready to give up, and she couldn't figure out what she was supposed to do next. Several days later, when the tension in the Taylor household reached its peak, the situation began to take a disturbing turn. Many questions remained unanswered, and all attempts to uncover the truth provided no relief. Anna continued to lose strength, her condition worsening, and suspicions began to accumulate around the family. Detective Martin Haley, known for his ability to solve even the most convoluted cases, was assigned to investigate. It all started with an anonymous call to the police, mentioning possible anomalies in the Taylor family's medical records. At first, he thought it might be a mistake, but the more he uncovered about the family, the stranger and more confusing the case became. Haley began by reviewing Anna's medical records and immediately noticed something that caught his attention. In her analyses, several medications had been prescribed without a clear necessity, and some of them were prohibited for medical use. What was strange was that these medications were not sourced from regular pharmacies but had been obtained through suspicious channels. Haley concluded that this might be related to something more than simple medical errors. One day, during his interrogations, he discovered that Jack Taylor, the girl's father, had ties to a private medical clinic that practiced alternative treatments. However, these methods were controversial and had been criticized by doctors. The detective decided that he needed to meet with him personally. Meanwhile, Laura, unaware of the investigation's progress, continued to search for answers. One of those late nights, while she was reviewing medical records, trying to make sense of what was happening, she received a call from Greta, her friend. The call was unexpected, but in Greta's voice, there was clear concern. Laura, I just heard something strange, she began, without preamble. You need to know. I spoke to one of my colleagues who works at the hospital, and she said your husband ordered medications for Anna that aren't on the approved list. Laura froze. She knew nothing about these medications. Her mind began to race with all those moments when she had noticed strange behavior in Jack, his evasive answers, and how he had been distancing himself more and more. Something clicked in her mind. What medications are they? Her voice became tense, filled with worry. I'm not sure, but she said there's something new, experimental, Greta replied. I think you should talk to Jack. He has to explain what's going on. Laura, though feeling she was losing control, knew she couldn't ignore it. Her heart was racing, and in her mind, there was only one question: why was her husband hiding something so serious? And what did it mean for their daughter? The next morning, when Jack left for work, Laura began searching for more information on the medications she had heard mentioned by Greta. The internet was full of articles and comments about untested medications, but none of them promised anything good. In fact, all of them were linked to dangerous and even harmful methods. Meanwhile, Detective Haley continued gathering evidence. He discovered that Jack had ordered these medications through a network of illegal suppliers and contacted several medical experts to confirm his suspicions. He knew that soon he would have to confront the Taylors, but first, he needed to be certain of his conclusions. That same day, Laura felt that something had changed. Jack came home later than usual, but in his eyes, there was a worried look, and his behavior was becoming more unsettling. Laura felt her patience was wearing thin. She could no longer stay silent. She decided to confront him directly. When Jack got home, Laura was waiting for him in their bedroom, tense and focused. "Where have you been?" she asked, trying to control her voice. Jack was surprised by her tone, but not enough to not notice her unease. "At work, like always," he replied, sinking onto the couch. Laura stared at him silently, and suddenly, her gaze landed on his pockets, where she saw the package of unknown medications. "What is this?" Her voice turned cold, determined. Jack blushed but tried to stay calm. "It's nothing," he said, looking away. "Just medications for Anna. They might help her." Laura looked at him intently, feeling her heart beat faster. "Aren't you going to tell me they're experimental drugs? Why are you hiding this from me?" Laura moved closer to him, unable to contain her anger and disappointment. Jack fell silent for a moment, as if he didn't know where to begin. Then, realizing he could no longer keep the truth hidden, he sighed. "Laura, you don't understand. I've done everything to save our daughter, and yes, I knew it could be risky, but we had no other choice. We've tried everything, but her condition keeps worsening." Laura was in shock, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Are you crazy?" Her voice trembled with anger and pain. "You're risking her life, all for what? Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you tell me?" Jack, seeing her fury, raised his hands in a gesture of reconciliation. "I thought that if I did it alone, you wouldn't worry so much. I didn't want you to get upset, Laura. I just wanted Anna to be okay." "You took away her chance to choose," Laura said, struggling. "You made her a part of your experiment." Her eyes were filled with tears. He couldn't understand it. Jack remained silent, unable to respond, and felt the fear begin to engulf him. He realized his decisions had brought his family to the brink of destruction. Meanwhile, Detective Haley was receiving new information and knew it was time to act. The investigation was progressing, and soon he would have to interrogate the Taylors. The truth was just around the corner, and now it was only a matter of time before everything came to light. The next morning, after the tense conversation with Jack, Laura couldn't take her eyes off his unmoving face. Her heart was filled with anxiety, and her mind was full of questions she couldn't answer. Her husband's confession about taking such dangerous measures made her feel as though her world was collapsing. Everything about her family, everything she had believed in, seemed to fall apart in an instant. Jack was acting strangely, evasive. He avoided her gaze and refused to speak. Every time Laura tried to bring up the subject of the medications, he grew nervous and dodged the question. But Laura could not stop. Something was stirring inside her, as though all this chaos was part of something far more terrifying than she could imagine. She couldn't believe that her husband, the man she loved and trusted, could hurt their daughter. She decided to act. That night, when Jack fell asleep, she quietly left their bedroom and went to her daughter's room. Anna was sleeping peacefully, her face serene and innocent, but Laura noticed how different her daughter had become. She was no longer the little girl she used to be. Laura closed her eyes, trying to focus her mind on one thought: how to help her child. She knew she needed to uncover the truth, and that truth was far worse than she could have imagined. Detective Haley continued with the investigation, gathering all the evidence possible to uncover what the Taylors were hiding. He reached out to colleagues and old acquaintances in the medical field to get a full picture. The medications he found in the medical records had no approval, and according to information from informants, they had been acquired through suspicious suppliers who were unlicensed. This raised new questions about a possible network of supply and manipulation of medications that could be linked to a much larger criminal activity. Haley was convinced that if he managed to crack this case, he would uncover a major organization involved in illegal drugs and possibly human experimentation. But despite all the evidence confirming his suspicions, Haley couldn't get too close to the Taylors without solid proof. All he had at that moment were words from anonymous informants and medical records that still needed to be verified. Meanwhile, Laura began to doubt what she knew about her husband. Every passing day, her relationship with Jack became more strained. He continued to hide in his own world, always talking about his work and avoiding discussing what was happening. His evasive behavior only heightened Laura's suspicions. She began searching online for medical investigations that might explain Anna's condition. What she found made her shiver. Those medications were linked to numerous cases of side effects and deviations in children. Some of them had severe consequences for health, but Jack kept using them. Laura was desperate. She couldn't understand why her husband had taken such drastic steps to save their daughter. Every new discovery raised more questions but provided no answers. Her love for Jack began to turn into painful distrust. And despite all her efforts, she knew she could no longer be sure of him. Her determination to resolve this matter grew stronger each day. Laura was determined to find all the answers, even if she had to do it alone. That same night, when Jack finally came home, his face was grim and worried. Laura felt that the situation was about to explode. She could wait no longer and decided to ask him the one question that had been tormenting her for days. "Are you going to explain to me what's going on with Anna? Why is she still getting worse? Why didn't you tell me about all those medications you're giving her?" Jack stood motionless, feeling the tension in her voice. His eyes darkened, and Laura noticed he was avoiding looking at her. "I've been at work, as always," he replied, collapsing onto the sofa. Laura stared at him in silence, and suddenly her eyes landed on the pockets of his jacket, where she saw the package of unfamiliar medications. "What is this?" Her voice became cold, determined. Jack turned pale but tried to stay calm. "It's nothing," he said, looking away. "Just some meds for Anna. They might help." Laura stared at him intently, feeling her heart race. "Aren't these experimental drugs? Why did you hide this from me?" She moved closer, unable to contain her anger and disappointment. Jack remained silent for a moment, as if he didn't know where to start. Then, realizing that he could no longer hide the truth, he sighed. "Laura, you don't understand. I've done everything I can to save her, and yes, I knew it could be risky, but we had no other choice. We've tried everything, but her condition is still getting worse." Laura was paralyzed. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Are you out of your mind?" Her voice trembled with rage and pain. "You're putting her life at risk, all for what? Why didn't you trust me? Why didn't you tell me?" Jack remained silent, staring at the floor. He knew that his wife had caught him, and he couldn't come up with any excuse. "I thought that if I handled it on my own, you wouldn't worry so much," he said, looking at Laura with eyes full of regret. "I didn't want you to get upset. I just wanted Anna to be okay." "You took away her chance to decide," Laura said, fighting back tears. "You turned her into part of your experiment." Her eyes were filled with sadness. He didn't understand anything. Jack remained silent, looking down. He felt the fear beginning to take over him. He knew that his decisions had brought his family to the brink of destruction. Meanwhile, Detective Haley continued to gather evidence and was getting closer to uncovering the entire network, which could completely destroy the Taylor family's life. Soon, everything would come to light, and the truth about the Taylors, as well as the horrific consequences of their actions, would be revealed to everyone. Several days passed, and the atmosphere in the Taylor household grew increasingly tense. Laura could no longer hide her doubts and worries. Every morning, she woke up thinking about her daughter and what she should do. She could no longer stand idly by waiting for everything to resolve itself. She decided to seek help outside her family. Laura decided to meet with the detective investigating the case. His name was Max Graves. She didn't know what to expect from this meeting, but she felt it was her last chance to find answers. The detective was already aware of the strange medications and the potential connection to illegal suppliers. He informed Laura that there would soon be another round of interrogations, and he planned to question Jack. Laura was willing to do whatever it took to protect her daughter. She knew her husband was involved in something far more serious than simple medical mistakes. He was hiding something, and she needed to find out what. Every day, her conviction that she had made the right decision grew stronger. Meanwhile, Jack, feeling the increasing pressure, became more irritable and distant. He knew his secret would soon be revealed, and his whole life would come crashing down. He could no longer deceive his wife, and he knew Laura wouldn't leave him in peace until she discovered the truth. Laura began her own investigation. She dug deeper into medical records and online sources, and soon discovered that several people, including some doctors, were working with unknown suppliers related to prohibited substances. When she tried to find a connection between these supplies and her daughter's condition, everything pointed to a terrifying truth: her husband, Jack, was involved in some sort of experiment using their daughter's health. Meanwhile, Detective Graves was finalizing the details for a major interrogation. He knew Jack had to be held accountable for his actions. However, there was an even more crucial event ahead: his meeting with Laura. "I'll do everything I can to help," the detective told her when they met. "We'll make sure the truth comes out." When Laura returned home, her heart was pounding. She knew she was about to face the final battle of her conscience and fear. She could no longer trust Jack's words. Every day, he hid more from her, and now it was too late to ignore it. That night, sitting at the table, Laura directly asked Jack, "Were you honest with me when you said you were doing everything to save our daughter? Or were you hiding something more dangerous?" Jack sat in silence, and in his eyes, Laura saw something she couldn't ignore: panic. He knew this moment was crucial. He could no longer deceive her. She could no longer believe his words. Every day, he had hidden more, and now it was too late. Laura realized that if she didn't stop him now, the consequences would be irreversible. The trial began the next day. The case attracted media attention, and soon every step, every decision became a public matter. Despite the personal pain, Laura decided to stay strong for her daughter. At the trial, many pieces of evidence were presented: medical documents, testimonies from Jack's colleagues, and reports about recent legal violations related to the falsification and illegal supply of medications. Additionally, expert testimonies showed how Jack and his wife's actions had affected their daughter's health. Laura became the key witness, providing a series of pieces of evidence that proved her husband not only made mistakes in choosing the treatment, but also exposed their daughter to real danger for his own interests and illegal experiments. When the judge delivered the verdict, Laura felt her world crumble. The court ruled that their parental rights were terminated, and their daughter, Anna, would be placed in protective custody. The court determined that Jack and Laura's actions had caused irreparable harm to their daughter, and under these circumstances, they could no longer be her legal guardians. Laura couldn't believe that her family was broken forever, but she knew it was the right decision. After the ruling, Laura didn't feel relief. Her daughter's health improved, but she knew she would have to fight a long battle to restore her physical and emotional well-being. She decided that it was still worth fighting for her future. When she left the court, her heart was empty. Jack was nearby, but she could no longer believe his excuses. This end was for her the beginning of a new path, a path of restoration, self-respect, and, above all, saving her daughter. Thinking back, Laura finally accepted what was coming, a new life, one where she and her daughter would be free from everything that had destroyed them. And so, a few days after the verdict, Laura had another meeting, this time at the children's home where Anna had been placed. The place was filled with orphan children, and Laura couldn't help but feel the pain as she saw her daughter, now in that home. Despite all her efforts, she couldn't bring her back home. But Laura knew that she could only trust herself and her strength to build a future where her life would be free from pain and fear.